Good evening, writers and readers, and welcome to Storytime. Today we are going to read from a work in progress titled Imorata. I will begin at Chapter 1. Westray, Orkney Islands, present day. I am so sorry, Nikolai said to the golden-haired girl beside him. He stood at the bottom of a coastal cliff in Westray, peering into Charybdis. Sunlight bore directly down on his back, and salt sea air licked the nape of his neck. Above the cave, jagged sandstone stacked atop sandstone, resembling centuries of dried blood, leading hapless victims to its lull. If the dive didn't sweep a body into the cave, the push of the tide would. Horrible way to die, Nikolai murmured, with a shake of his head. A foul wind wafted from inside, buffeting Nikolai's face, mixing with Scotland's salt spray. It was too old, yet fresh, lending him a vision of what was trapped inside. "Patience, Malishka," he said in a hushed tone. "Our journey is coming to an end." Squeezing his wide shoulders through the entrance, Nikolai struggled into the cave proper. He pushed past each slimy outcrop of rock as he walked the narrow path to hell. He covered his mouth to contain his bile from joining the animal refuse rotting in the water. His eyes teared from the stench, and his balance shifted with the small waves lapping just above his ankles. Holding tight to a stalagmite, Nikolai forced his bearings to a course that would lead him to the greatest source of putrid decomposition. Up and down no longer held a firm foundation in his mind, but he wasn't about to let his vertigo win. "You listened, found my body," a tiny, wispy voice said beside him. Glancing to his left, Nikolai stared into the deep azure eyes of a little girl with thick blonde curls, wearing a yellow and white jumper. He watched her silhouette flicker, seeing the jagged cavern wall through her. He was tempted to reach out with his hand to end this quest. "You accepted this. All you need to do is get the body and then go back to your truck. Body and truck, truck and body. Don't forget the plan." He turned his attention back to the bloated corpse caught inside the gullet of the cavern. Nikolai would have to collect the body and exit the cave. It would be disrespectful to just bring back part of the body. And once high tide started, multiple trips would be impossible. A deep, wordless dirge began, echoing all around him, and a strange wind tickled the back of his neck, raising goose flesh along his arms. Absently, he brushed his hands over the skin and bone to warm them. His sloshing created a counterpoint to the dirge, like the smacking of salivated lips. The jagged stalagmites and columns, broken from tides, threatened to impale him if he slipped. The stench of decayed plant and animal carcasses teased Nikolai's equilibrium with every inch of movement. Reaching the body, Nikolai knelt down and wrapped a harness around it, fastening it over his shoulder. He made his way toward the entrance. The water level was now touching his lower calf, but high tide was still an hour away, still plenty of time. Something heavy skittered across the craggy cavern floor, and Nikolai jerked his head to find out what fell or broke. An earnest sensation of being watched nagged at him as if a monster resented the theft of its dinner. But nothing caught his attention. He glanced at the little spirit, whose eyes widened until her pupils were pinpoints. "Follow me. We must leave before you turn revenant."
Revenant? Is that what killed me?
Her haunting voice echoed around him. "No, you drowned." Nikolai noted that the girl's corpse didn't appear a shriveled-up husk. Another rock skimmed the water's surface, and a dull roar resounded from the other end of the cavern. Nikolai's breath caught as he snagged his foot on something. It pulled at him, attempting to trap him inside the cave. With a grunt, he ripped his leg forward, falling into the water and muck as he did so. At least, the corpse wasn't hurt.
"Run!"
the girl wailed, pointing behind at them. Nikolai turned and saw a rotting hand holding tight to his ankle. A head rose, devoid of hair, skin, and half its jaw. Milky eyes zeroed in on Nikolai as a second ghost twisted and pulled his leg. "Trouble never comes alone," Nikolai muttered, yanking his ankle free from the creature's desperate grasp. Standing up, Nikolai felt the girl's body against his shoulder blades, and he staggered toward the rotting figure. One wretched hand stretched forth so that he might impale himself on sharp claws, but Nikolai grabbed it as he stumbled. Twirling the abomination with his human hand, Nikolai thrust his osseous into the crumbling ribcage and grasped the blackened heart within. A nasty smirk sliced up one side of his face as he plucked the heart out. A beam of light split the creature, and its shriveling body splintered in Nikolai's palm until nothing but ash remained as proof that this ghost existed in the first place. "Das Svidanya Bezdushny." Nikolai spat into the muck where the creature had lain. Water undulated around his calves, whipping his attention to the entrance. Pins shivered down the sides of his legs and bit into his heels. Had he been down here too long? All thoughts narrowed down to two words: get out. Fighting against the sludge, Nikolai noticed the current was growing choppier. The combination of rushing water and narrowed walls pitched Nikolai against the slimy rocks he had avoided minutes before. He twisted his body so they banged against his own arms and legs instead of the girl's body. Stalagmites brushed their thick, clammy fingers against his shirt, trying to make him another victim of Charybdis. He paid no attention to his ripped clothes and bruised skin in his efforts to get away. The sunlight bouncing off rock and water caused spots to cloud his vision. And again, Nikolai couldn't tell which way was up. He stumbled. A knee skimmed the rock floor as he crouched in the muck, cradling his head. Echoes were everywhere, pulling his attention in all directions. His breath hitched. "Show yourself, revenant!" He cast a wild glance around the cavern, trying to locate the origins of the roar. "Stop this. You'll drive yourself insane. There is no revenant here any longer." The faceless voices continued to taunt him, gaining their advantage from Nikolai's temporary blindness.
"Get up,"
a tiny voice pled. Something tugged his sleeve, and he caught a little hand clasped around the fabric. Though he saw the fabric through her fingers, Nikolai felt her hand all the same. Taking in a ragged breath, Nikolai forced himself to his feet, and his fingers grazed the small burden on his back. It was still secure in its harness. Clamping his jaw down, Nikolai dragged in another breath, and then a third, until he felt the beat of his heart begin to steady. "Yes, it's time to go. If I become a corpse here, no one will bring you to a proper rest." Looking away from the entrance to keep from getting dizzy, Nikolai figured out how to escape. Scraping and slipping backward, he shoved himself and the corpse away from the darkness inside the cave. Clamping his jaw down, Nikolai dragged in another breath, and then a third, until he felt the beat of his heart begin to steady. Yes, it's time to go. If I become a corpse here, no one will bring you to a proper rest. Looking away from the entrance to keep from getting dizzy again, Nikolai figured out how to escape. Scraping and slipping backwards, he shoved himself and the corpse away from the darkness inside the cave. Bruised and bloody, he pushed both the body and himself outside. Resting a moment to adjust to the knee-deep ocean, clear skies, and calm coast, Nikolai frowned back at the cavern. Its natural appearance, a small hole at sea level, felt out of place. It had almost become his tomb, and made him uneasy. In a few hours, the cave would be completely submerged, and he could forget it. Even a strong human swimmer wouldn't survive the undertow generated as the tide rose. Nikolai didn't want to test his superhuman strength, especially with his duty not yet complete. Cinching the harness's straps tighter to prevent the body from slipping out, Nikolai started climbing his rope ladder to the top of the cliff. There the little girl's final resting place waited, and he needed to finish the ritual before the spirit became restless. If that happened, he would have one more revenant to face, and he'd already exhausted himself splunking. Soil and sandstone fell into the hole on the new grave. With each shovelful, Nikolai covered sightless eyes and lightened his heart as the little girl's body became invisible to the world. He forced the last shovelful of dirt onto the grave with finality. With his human hand and skeletal working in tandem, Nikolai patted it down until the earth was compact. Adding stones and shrubs, he hid it from the world. Leaning against the shovel, Nikolai ran the back of his hand against his forehead to catch the sweat. He looked up at the sliver of the moon rising on the horizon. Burying her had taken up the rest of the day, and the sun was nearly gone. He turned to the little girl, noticing her translucent body shake while she stared down at her grave. Her azure eyes glossed over as she knelt down, touching the ground above her mortal form. A breeze rose up and passed through them without ruffling her blonde curls or yellow and white jumper. But her image flickered as if disturbed by the world she no longer played in. Nikolai walked around her grave, standing across from her. He coughed to get her attention. He smiled and held out his right hand, the human one, for her to grasp. It is done. You have to go now. Furrowing his brows, he frowned as he watched her focus drop to his hand, studying it in hesitation. The weight of her stare caused his outstretched palm to twitch. Time crawled from minutes into what felt like hours, and Nikolai thought of his options. Should he force the issue? How much harm could come from showing more patience? She would never grow up in this lifetime. She needed to say goodbye. The image of the rotting ghost in the back of the cavern gave a pretty convincing counter-argument. Nikolai's shoulders fell with a heavy sigh. His portal of generosity was diminishing. He raised his left hand, just as the little spirit took hold of his right. She closed her eyes, raised her face to the pale moon, and let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, Nikolai. The small voice trembled as it spoke. I'm ready now. A small pressure shivered throughout Nikolai's body, and her spirit shimmered with the gathering of energy. Bowing in respect, Nikolai uttered a benediction for her. For death is not an ending, May the path unto rebirth cleanse the race of your previous life. May you reunite with those who shared your glories, and look forward to your next journey with renewed fervor as your burdens are made light. She flickered and faded into the night, her soft laughter chiming in the wind. Alone again, he embraced a surge of electricity flowing throughout his body. He inhaled deep, filling his lungs with the smell of heather and the sharp, clean air. He exhaled, letting loose the energy. His sense of time returned to its normal flow as he slipped completely into his human form. As he walked back to his truck, Nikolai gave one final glance over his shoulder at the grave. There was a spring to his step, and for a few moments he felt like he might float off the ground. After months of scouring the Orkney Islands for lost souls, it was good to send the last ones on to the cycle of resurrection. The child would get a new life, and perhaps a more pleasant outcome. Such was how human spirits moved in the world, neither going to Tartarus nor Elysian, where the gods resided. Humans put it simply when they said, life goes on. A ringtone fragmented Nikolai's rare peace into the stark, black and white reality. With a groan, he fumbled between his shovel and truck keys for the cell phone ringing in the pocket of his camo pants. Sighing, Nikolai pressed the talk button, bringing the mobile to his ear. What is it? Nikolai forced through gritted teeth, expecting his commander to be checking up on his assignment. I have a new directive for you, a cold voice said, startling Nikolai. This is not my commander. Nikolai's back snapped ramrod straight like a bucket of ice water was dumped over him. Each cube slipped down his sweat-drenched shirt, causing him to shiver. He took great gulps of air, and his legs wobbled as if made of gelatin. His heart was pounding so hard, a slight breeze could have knocked him over. The cavern was a distant memory already. I am so dead. That's the end of chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed story time with me. Please let me know down in the comments section what your thoughts were, and if you'd like to see more of this from me. Also down in my description are all of my social medias, my Facebook, my Twitter, my Patreon, my YouTube. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night, and please always keep writing.